Assalamu alaikum. This is Namira Islam with MuslimARC, the Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. I'm bringing to you guys today a panel called Muslim Urban Justice, which is, we're really excited to bring this to your screens today. We've got a really amazing group of people working on amazing issues in different areas across the country. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them, and then we can get right into talking about what everybody does and kind of Muslim engagement with these issues. So these are community leaders with strong experiences on the ground, and their efforts can serve as models for other people. So our aim here at MuslimARC is to be able to move beyond like just philosophical conversations and shift to on-the-ground work and intervene in a real way. So here are their bios. First up, we have Arbazz, who grew up as a third culture child, born and raised in Southern California. He also lived in Saudi Arabia for 6 years. At an early age, he was committed to the Islamic principles. Inspired by Imam Siraj Wahaj's story, Arbazz co-founded Sahaba Initiative at the early age of 17. Throughout high school and college, he was very active in the community, serving as the director of Multicultural Advisory Council at Riverside City College, a volunteer for a number of mental health programs throughout Riverside County, and he served as an advisor to a number of community-based projects. Currently, Arbazz works as the director of the nonprofit Resource Center of Riverside County and serves as the president of Sahaba Initiative. He's also earned a bachelor's in public relations and communications from SB, and is certified by a number of organizations in nonprofit development. Arbazz is currently completing 2 associate's degrees in Islamic studies and is continuing to seek his master's in theology. In his free time, Arbazz enjoys reading about philosophy, theology, digital media, and holistic living. Next up, we have Mark Crain. Mark is a digital strategist, community organizer, and online campaigner with experience serving both small, not-for-profit, and national advocacy organizations. He co-founded and ran a web development firm for 5 years, was communications coordinator at Chicago's Inner City Muslim Action Network, and served on the digital team at the Obama 2012 campaign. He's currently a campaign director with the progressive advocacy group MoveOn.org. After returning to his hometown Detroit in 2013, Mark began his involvement with Dream of Detroit, a Muslim-led community development initiative on the west side of the city. He currently serves in a volunteer capacity as project director. Mark is married to Hazel Gomez, and they have 2 young boys, Musa and Haroon. Next, we have Sarah Jawaid, who is a community organizer with LA Voice, a nonprofit affiliate of the PICO National Network, where she does faith-based social justice organizing and leadership development in Los Angeles. She's worked on policy change for affordable housing issues, economic opportunity, and criminal justice reform. The most recent win being the passage of Prop 47, a statewide ballot initiative to redirect money from prisons to schools. Formerly, she worked on national transportation policy at the Urban Land Institute and affordable housing advocacy at the National Housing Conference. During this time, she was the director of Green Muslims, a group started to raise awareness of environmental issues within a Muslim context. She has a BS from the University of Southern California in public policy and a master's degree from UC Irvine in urban planning. She resides in Los Angeles with her husband. And last but not least, we have Shamar Hemphill. Shamar brings with him vast experience in the areas of civic engagement, community organizing, and youth development. Born on the south side of Chicago, he attended Langston University in 1999 and began studying sociology. Upon his return to Chicago in 2005, he took a position at the Moss Foundation as youth coordinator, working with both Arab and African American Muslim youth. In 2007, Shamar was recruited to participate in Public Allies, a leadership development program started by Michelle Obama. After graduating from Public Allies in 2008, Shamar began working for the Inner City Muslim Action Network as coordinator for the organization's youth department. He possesses many years' experience working in low-income neighborhoods throughout the Chicagoland area, both as an organizer and adult ally to young people. So as you can all tell, we have some really, really great people on the panel today. So I'm going to let them sort of start out talking about their organizations, kind of what projects they're working on, background behind what the organizations do, and then we're going to move into some, interesting discussion after that. So we're going to start with Arbazz. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I just want to thank the organizers for having us, or having me also on the panel. So I just want to talk a little bit about the Sahaba Initiative. Sahaba Initiative started basically to meet some of the needs of the masjid in our area. The masjid that we are at right now, it's been around for about 20 years, and over those 20 years, they have had different projects developing in the community, the school. They have had different classes, all these different things, but they haven't met critical void in the community, and that had to do with social services, drug and alcohol, rehabilitation, and people that are really struggling to get their lives together, although they're at the masjid most of the time. So one of the things that we noticed in our community is that throughout the day, if you walk into the masjid, you'll notice people sleeping on the side, sitting at the masjid, asking for money and things like that. And one of the things is they've been doing that for about 10, 15 years since the masjid started, was no one has addressed that need. The Sahaba Initiative began to address some of the critical needs in our masjid, but we realized that we couldn't do it on site over there just because of the different stipulations, of the different problems that are always going on within some of the within our masjids. So we began by doing three different things. The first thing is we provided mentorship for the people at the masjid, helping them get resources within the community, helping them get a little bit of assistance here and there, transition them into housing. And then we focused on support groups. We started drug and alcohol support groups in the local coffee shop across the street. Helping people just kind of like vent and talk about whatever issues they're going through, and provide the spiritual side with it also. Having different leaders that have understanding and training in this area, kind of like a system during the support groups. And then the third area is that we were just giving back to the community. So we took people within our community and showed them the face of the entire community at large by taking them out to help and volunteer locally in our community. And we did that for about a year or two before we decided we need to develop this program, kind of establish it, and we filed for our paperwork and established our 501c3. And the model is and we divided our model into two different areas. One is direct services, which is providing the services directly to the people, whether it's food, zakat, family counseling, therapy, assistance. But then we also have the second area, which is education. We noticed that we can't move forward with just direct services because there's a lot of stigma in getting people to come in, kind of open up and feel comfortable with us. So we had to go out and focus on education. So we do a lot of classes, a lot of trainings, and different things in the community that might not directly address some of the issues that they have, because the people have, but it kind of gives them an avenue to kind of engage them and kind of notice that this is an avenue for them to kind of get the help that they need. And for the next our plan for the next few years is kind of develop these two different areas and build a model where we kind of work with the greater community, collaborating with other nonprofits, and kind of meeting the critical need that we have in our community by collaborating and developing programs within our community at large. So that's just a little background about Sahaba Initiative.
Yeah, that's amazing, mashallah. So that's great to hear about mentorship and then direct services and just community engagement. So that's awesome. Mark, let's move on to Dream of Detroit. If you could tell us a little bit about Dream of Detroit.
Sure thing. I have to stop my computer from freezing first. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I want to just start by, briefly, of course, thanking MuslimARC for organizing this panel and bringing us all together, and of course to my co-panelists as well. I'll keep my remarks sort of brief. I'll give you guys an introduction of Dream, but I'm particularly eager to get to the questions that folks may have and to sort of be in conversation with the rest of the panelists. So a bit about Dream. We were founded in 2012 on the west side of Detroit as a collaboration basically between two nonprofits. One group called Neighborly Needs and another group called the Indus Community Action Network, or ICANN. And Neighborly Needs essentially sort of grew out of the local black Muslim community, specifically out of Imam Mohammed's community, may Allah's mercy be upon him. And ICANN originated in the local Pakistani community. Unfortunately, often there aren't enough positive sort of examples in our broader American Muslim community of us working productively across sort of entrenched ethnic and cultural barriers. And so it was the sort of coming together of these two groups in a really thoughtful and sincere way that actually inspired me to get involved as early as I could, as someone who wasn't there at the very outset. And so, as it was originally envisioned, DREAM stood for Detroit Revival Engaging American Muslims. We also like to think of it as empowering American Muslims, or even empowered by American Muslims. And we eventually began to use the name Dream of Detroit as a way to say to the broader American Muslim community, when you think about where American Muslims can have the most impact in terms of community development, we think that you should dream of Detroit. That there are particular opportunities and benefits that present themselves here, and we'd like to see this as an area that people think is ripe for investment, for solidarity, and as a place where we can really build some authentic community. There's obviously a long history of Islam in Detroit that we don't have time to get into, but our goal is to sort of recreate the sort of viable urban Muslim presence that was once really strong and apparent here in this city. So our mission is to combine community organizing with strategic housing and land development to build a healthy community and empower a marginalized neighborhood. And we are particularly working, like I said, on the west side of Detroit. We're working in a neighborhood that is anchored by a masjid here that's really the sort of biggest masjid in Detroit proper. It's called the Muslim Center Mosque and Community Center. It's been on this particular corner for about 30 years. And it's a neighborhood that's also served by Detroit's only Muslim-run free health clinic, which is the Huda Clinic. And Huda originally started actually inside of the masjid before becoming a standalone clinic about half a decade ago. And so this is an area where Muslims have actually made a sizable commitment over the years in terms of time and people power and money, but it's an area where we haven't been living very densely, actually. And so, one of the outcomes we hope of this project is to really build a thriving community that's living around this masjid and that's sort of, is circling these Muslim institutions here in Detroit. So, when we talk about sort of what we envision, we talk about envisioning a city that is amplified by its downtown business and entertainment districts, which is the sort of area that's getting the most attention in Detroit these days. But we also envision a city that's anchored actually in its sustainable neighborhoods. A city where home ownership, small business development, cooperative economics, local food sourcing, access to education and to the arts are priorities of every neighborhood. And a city where compassion and mercy sort of define the relationships of its residents. And that's what we want to sort of model by coming and living amongst each other in this particular area. Essentially we want to build a viable, urban, multi-ethnic, mixed-income, Muslim-led, values-based community. Those are the sort of string of adjectives that we often put together to sort of to encompass what we're trying to get to here. And so how do we translate that mission and that vision into really sort of tangible work? We consider ourselves a sort of nascent community development corporation, if you will, and a community organization. Like I said, community organizing is half of how we plan to make this thing happen. And so our main priority right now is actually to purchase vacant homes in our neighborhood, rehab them, and then find families to live in them. Unfortunately, we're not talking about little fixer-uppers here. This is an area that has over a 30% vacancy rate. A lot of these vacant homes that we're looking at have been empty for 12 or 15 years. Anything of obvious value in them was stripped a long time ago. But we're still operating from this premise that the greenest building is the one that's already there. And so while we aren't able to do things like completely LEED certified green retrofits right now, mainly due to lack of resources, what we are trying to do is preserve the structures that exist, to bring them up to date, to bring them up to code, and to have them be as sort of eco-friendly as possible. A second piece of our work is community engagement. And so far we've done that through a series of sort of large-scale volunteer days where we've brought out folks to do some of the sort of unskilled labor that's involved in cleaning up the neighborhood, clearing out some of these homes that have been trashed and dumped in by illegal dumpers and so forth. We've had a number of a couple of dinners, a couple of sort of interactive community meetings, but and we'll continue to sort of grow our community engagement program as we build up more capacity to support that. And then the third piece is eventually getting to an economic development plan for the neighborhood. And our hope is that once we've sort of hit a tipping point with the housing work, where it's sort of on auto drive, if you will, that we can then turn our attention to some of these commercial corridors that are in our neighborhood that are ripe for redevelopment, and that were once thriving and pulsing with businesses. And so those are some of our sort of key priorities. The beautiful thing about this area is, again, because Muslims have invested so much here already, we have a history of providing social services in this area. The Muslim Center has had a soup kitchen for 30 years, right? Huda Clinic has been around for more than 10 years at this point. The community center is often open for public programs. There's a halal jazz cafe, as we call it, that's actually attached to the masjid. So this is an area where Muslims have had a visible presence. So there are some really distinct voids that Dream can fill. There isn't too much opportunity for mission creep, if you will, because we know the specific things that are needed in the area to help bring it back to life. But we hope that once we've started to achieve some of these goals of the Community Development Corporation sort of aspect of our work, that again we can have a thriving community organization that's led by leaders, residents from the community, and that's engaged in advocacy at the state and local level to create the best sort of life opportunities for people in Detroit. And so for us that means how are we as Muslims employing our values in a way that helps the broadest number of people possible. That is what we hope will sort of define the range of issues that we ultimately engage in and advocate for. But getting more specific about that will take time as we go through the process of building our base, identifying leaders, training folks, going through the sort of popular education and those sorts of things. So I think I've probably rambled along for enough. I do want to just, before I forget, toss out our website for anyone who's interested in learning more about us. And I'm sure I'll repeat this later, but dreamofdetroit.org, dreamofdetroit.org. You can go there to sign up for our email list. You can go there to like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. If you're particularly interested in our work and want to support, there's of course an opportunity for you to contribute there. And I will just say in closing that what I'm thankful for is that people, really Muslims across the country, have answered this call to dream of Detroit when they think about community development. And we have some monthly sustainers from places like Oklahoma, from LA actually. I hope we're not diverting resources from LA Voice. But I'm happy to see that that there are folks outside of our immediate sphere that see the possibilities that we really think are present here. And again, I'll sort of close with that, and I'm eager to sort of dive into questions that folks may have.
Yeah, Jazakallah, that's great. I'm really liking, so far just with two of you guys, it's just that idea of the mosque, like things getting almost, starting kind of like from the mosque and then kind of, extending and just services surrounding it, and it's just very interesting to think about. And Sarah, like, it's just, I think like your perspective is also going to add an interesting layer and kind of, diversify our perspective on this issue as well. So please tell us about your work.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you again for MuslimARC to put this amazing panel together. So I'm a community organizer with LA Voice. LA Voice was started in 2000. We're part of PICO National Network, which is a national network of faith-based organizations that do community organizing through congregations. So in LA, of course, we're based in Los Angeles. We're working throughout LA County with about 30 different congregations, mosques, synagogues, churches, and other organizations. We represent thousands of families, and we work on a lot of different issues that impact our people, all the way from immigration reform, education, healthcare, and then the stuff I work on, which is more around dismantling mass incarceration, reentry type of work. So we have about 8 people on staff, 5 organizers that work in different parts of LA. I work with the Black Muslim community in South Los Angeles with Homeboy Industries, the largest service provider for ex-gang members in the country, and I also work with the synagogue and other Muslims in different parts of LA. So that's a little bit about our organization, and the issues that I'm working on now are centered on basically shifting resources away from making money off of people of color towards community-based solutions, towards second chances, towards really bringing redemption, healing, and faith into our system. So, so it's basically like larger systems issues. So as an organizer, I'm really like identifying people with leadership qualities, helping draw out leadership further, doing training, teaching, coaching, and helping people understand how power works. So doing a lot of power mapping about who are the real people behind the curtains that like make decisions. Because often it's, you know, they're hidden. Power is hidden. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of community meetings. It's a lot of one-to-ones, and really trying to find connecting people with their self-interest. And so with the communities I'm working in, obviously their self-interest is around like making it easier to enter back into society after you've been, you know, formally incarcerated. So, so our big like victory in the fall was the passage of Prop 47, which in California reduces 6 non-violent felonies into misdemeanors. And we had a statewide campaign. PICO ran the largest grassroots campaign to get voters out, and these were voters who are not as typical, voters, low propensity voters. And so, so each federation, we have many throughout the state, basically did a voter engagement campaign centered around Prop 47. And I was really proud to have like mosques as part of that. A particular example was the mosque that Imam Jihad Safir runs in Masjid Badala and Isla. They had a team with not only folks from their community, but also Latino Muslims from LALMA, the Latino Muslim Association of America. So they were working together on getting the vote out for this. So that was really cool, and really like proud of that. And so now my work is really centered around following up and making sure that we're getting the laws implemented in the way the voters intended. So it's a lot of following up, accountability stuff with decision makers, and continuing to make sure that leaders are learning through the process. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my organization.
That's amazing. Seriously, mashallah, it's just very, very cool to hear about these kind of initiatives that are happening on the ground across the country, as we can see from some of these, you know, discussions right now. So it's awesome. I mean, we've heard Black Muslims, Pakistani Muslims, Latino Muslims. I mean, it's really cool. So thank you for that. And then last but not least, we're gonna, you know, Shamar, if you could tell us about your work, that'd be great.
So yes, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Salam to the panelists. Great to be on the panel with you all. Thank you to MuslimARC. IMAN, Inner City Muslim Action Network, founded in 1997. Total opposite of some of the other initiatives. Very racially diverse neighborhood and segments of the population of Muslims working to start IMAN on the southwest side, which is probably one of the most diverse communities on the south side. Latino, Arab, African American in one melting pot, and even still some white Lithuanian families that's left there. IMAN is a community-based organization that looks to foster health, wellness, and healing in the inner city of Chicago by organizing for social change, operating a holistic health center, and inspiring and cultivating through the arts. And one of, I mean, of course, we have a service. We have a serve, change, and inspire model that literally is based upon our direct services that we've been running for many years, a number of years. We also have a free health clinic that we operate. We've been operating that free health clinic for almost 10 to 12 years since the inception, really. But as of late, we started to operate 6 days a week. We see about 3,000 to 4,000 patients a year, and we just recently, as of last year, added a behavioral health component to our health clinic as well. So that's constantly growing. We have youth development and youth art services that we have as well. Fresh Expressions, where young people use creativity. We bring about 100 young people across the city together to that's inserting an organizing theme to it that creates the harm-free and safe zones within the Southwest side. So they use art to express and talk about issues that they're facing on a daily basis. We have digital media literacy and technology programming called Digital Media Masters that trains young people to understand media, to understand writing and journalism. And we graduated about 7 cohorts so far. And then one of our biggest service initiatives is our Green Reentry project that works with the formerly incarcerated Muslim men, starting out with Muslim men that is returning back home from the institution, and we're training them in green retrofitting vacant properties, and so they actually stay in the transitional home, in the Green Reentry transitional home, while learning green technology skills and retrofitting vacant properties. And so far we've retrofitted 2 homes already. We're on our 3rd and 4th home. So that's one of our biggest initiatives to really stabilize the neighborhood and the blocks. Our social justice component is really made up in 3 layers. There's advocacy, where we work on criminal justice. We work on education and immigration. And of course, that is a citywide and nationally wide, type of advocacy work that takes place. We work our campaign component. Our main flagship campaign is really working with corner stores to transform Arab operated stores. Especially, there's a phenomenon in cities like Chicago, Detroit, Oakland, Cleveland, New Orleans, where a lot of Arab-owned operated stores are ran predominantly in African-American neighborhoods. And of course, we're working with about 34 stores. We have about 75 stores in our cohort that we work to transform through 4 components, which is food access, racial tension, healing racial tension, policy, and there is education as well. And so we do that through a number of ways. And so far, we're on the cusp of creating a Chicago model. And then the 3rd layer is our youth organizing component, where we work on restorative justice, jobs, and of course workforce development. And so so we have about a cohort of about 25 to 50 youth that we work with and that we train through community organizing, and they're integrated in a lot of our organizing work. So that has been one of the biggest and brightest spots through our organizing work that is taking place. And then of course we have our own organizing curriculum. We've been training folks across the country within our organizing curriculum, 2-day training, and of course we use pop ed, popular education and civic ed to train leaders as well. And then our last component of our work is our inspirational work, our inspired work that most folks around the country know us for, which is our arts and culture work, which is our the largest urban Muslim festival of its kind. We hold it on the south side in the same park that called Marquette Park that Martin Luther King marched through in 1965-66, and that brought out over 10,000 folks. We've had people perform there as many as Mos Def, Lupe, Talib Kweli, Tanari Wynn, folks that the Narcissists, folks that's coming from across the country and the world that comes to that park, the same park that Martin Luther King marched in. And we hold community cafes that we use artistic expression across the city as a venue to build relationships, connect, and use advocacy to talk about our issues, and of course to share art and really have a Muslim presence in the city. So we use those venues to do that. So that in the short term is what make up IMAN. I didn't want to rumble on too long. That was a shorter version. So.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I think it's very interesting to see like the different aspects of all the work that's being done. There's so many different fields, right? Where it's housing and it's healthcare and it's just the structural legal forces that are there to kind of prevent these things from happening through other means. I mean, nobody else is doing it, right? It's that sense where there's a need and you guys are stepping in, your organizations are stepping in, your other staff are stepping in, mentorship and arts, and it's just very comprehensive, and it's just really very amazing to hear about that. So given all of this, given the work that's being done like on the ground, it's a two-part question, you know, like one, what has been the Muslim response to your work, right, you know, so far? Obviously, you know, you guys are all working in this. Some of your coworkers are Muslim, some of your funders are Muslim, but so far, what has been the Muslim response? And then, moreover, how can Muslims further support this work? How can they really be there for you as you guys are doing this? So, you know, we can start, whoever wants to take it, and then we can sort of develop and see, you know, if there's differences, if you guys have encountered regional differences, or just, you know, what kind of differences you've seen across the board.
I'll jump in. So first of all, the Muslims have answered the call across the country when it comes to supporting IMAN. You know, whether there is direct monetary resources, to really being on the ground, to utilizing our you know, our services, to utilizing our skill sets, to implement in other cities. So IMAN has been blessed in that area to have the response that it has, especially you know, during the month of Ramadan. Muslims really respond to our organization and our work, and so we're very grateful to that, and we're very grateful to having allies across the country who really believe in our mission and our work and the type of relationship that's been built over the years. Of course, within our day-to-day and our groundwork, we get the type of response from a large scale. I mean, there's constantly, especially from the quote-unquote immigrant community, that is really, you know, getting involved in initiatives that they want to be on the ground. Our corner store campaign has garnered a lot of attention. Our green reentry work has garnered a lot of attention, and of course, our arts and culture definitely garners a lot of the attention. And so, and increasingly with our health clinic, we have a team of volunteer docs who are exceptional, and the health clinic is now growing into a phase of becoming federally qualified, a federally qualified health center. So we're slowly importing things like, you know, dentistry, and so the you know, so that our that department is growing tremendously. Where I see some of the tension lies with some of this work is still this big question between how important are the inner cities, right? How important is this work to the larger Muslim community, especially when we think about the populations that oftentimes live in the inner city, and predominantly those are oftentimes, African American and Latino Muslims that reside in the inner city. And so I think, IMAN has been really trying to look at the bridge of more connectivity, right? Those who support our work becoming leaders, right? Going from donating to actually being on the ground, providing the necessary resources and skill set that it will take to sustain the work, going deeper in the work. Definitely, I think the diversifying of our funding streams and attempts to really to engage the large Muslim community has been one that has been been growing, but at the same time a bit stagnant a little bit, because people are still trying to understand where they fit in just in a larger scheme when we start thinking about urban centers. And so, yeah, so but we've been getting a really good response. It's just, I think the connectivity to what's been happening in the world and around the world, and to folks' homeland, to their own country. How do they begin to see the self-interest of the urban centers connected to their own injustices that they encounter in their own homeland, and inabilities that they may feel supporting efforts back home. So
Interesting.
Entities like IMAN always has to find ways to intervene within this thinking process of seeing America, these neighborhoods that have Muslims that live in these neighborhoods, seeing them as just as connected to the larger Muslim voice and the larger Muslim narrative across the world. So that's
I wanted to add to that, just building on what Brother Shamar said. I mean, IMAN has really been like a beacon for many organizations nationally about like how to do this right. And so, I'm grateful for the example. And I would say there's practical ways that Muslims can support, whether it's financially supporting, organizing, or whatever else is going on. And then I would say that there's internal work that really needs to be done, both on an individual level and within our communities, about this, about what Brother Shamar is talking about, which is race. And really, like, the first revolution is internal. Like, we need to be clear about what's happening in our own communities on race, and we need to be clear about what's happening within our own selves on implicit bias, and like whether we value other people's lives more than people that look like ourselves. Like, we need to be real about that, and our faith teaches so much that we really can set an example nationally about what it means to really know someone from another tribe. And like, our faith says so much, and I think that that's really like what I would say the call to action to is really stepping up, and there's a particular audience that is going to be watching this, right, that's already probably a little bit aware. So it's like, how can we develop our sophistication around race issues in the U.S. and like how they come to head within our Muslim communities? And the deeper we're able to have those honest conversations with someone that's not from the same race and able to like work that stuff out, we can really set an example for the rest of the country on how to lean into each other from a place of faith and love and human dignity.
Yeah, it's really interesting if you think about it, because we've got, obviously it's like the Muslim response. Some of the people that come to you guys and get services are Muslim, and then some of the other end, it's like the Muslim response external to the organization on both ends. And in some ways, when you're talking about like mentorship, for example, I feel like there's the mentorship of people who are not receiving the direct services. Like you mentioned, having to sort of talk to these, other people who might not see the value of what your organization is doing, and there's a mentorship process and a communication process there as well. So it's really interesting to kind of look at both sides of the Muslim response. Mark or Arbazz?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I'm really grateful for the response that we've seen from folks, across this region. Michigan is Michigan is like the South in a lot of ways when it comes to race, and unfortunately, like, that history has really seeped into the way that Muslims relate to each other in this area. And again, that's one of the reasons that I was first interested in this project, seeing from the outset the Pakistani and the Black community come together in a way that I thought was really sincere. One of the phrases that we've been using recently is this concept of solidarity and not charity. We're under no illusions that if this project is going to work, it's going to be led by Black Muslims first and foremost, moving back into this neighborhood. None of us expect the Pakistani community that's built a huge infrastructure out in Canton to move 40 miles over into Detroit. None of us sort of have those sort of blinders on. But we do hope that in the long term that this can be a multi-ethnic project, and we're trying to give ourselves the space to sort of to hash through the really difficult issues around race, around ethnicity, and the difficult histories that and baggage that come with that a lot of folks remember about various interactions amongst our communities. All of that can't just be erased, right? But we're trying to give ourselves the space, both the sort of the hard space, but also give each other the space to work through these issues in a way that in a safe way, in a way that isn't in a way that gives people an opportunity to actually grow. But I'll also say that one of the reasons that personally this is so important to me is that I think for a lot of folks who and I'm a convert actually, and for a lot of folks who converted after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, there are a few parts of his story that resonate with people. One is, of course, the sort of discipline of his own life. Another is the sort of depth of his faith. But a third part is that very sort of slim end of the book where he starts to talk about the universality of Islam. And honestly, if that's the part that brings you into the community, you face a difficult wake-up call when you actually step into the Muslim community. And like Sarah said, I mean, this is an area where we should really be exemplary in terms of how our community works in the context of America. And it's, you know, the idea that we could rid our community of racism. You know, it's one of the most like promising things that the Muslims can bring to this country, and it's an area where we're absolutely failing. And so it's good though to see groups like MuslimARC sort of taking this issue head on, and groups like the ones who are on the call today, who are bringing folks together like in very tangible ways to work together and break down some of these barriers.
Arbazz, any thoughts on this?
It's kind of a difficult question. I was just thinking about it. You know, in our community, there's definitely people who are supportive, and there's definitely people that aren't supportive. I mean, one of the reasons they are supportive is they see that youth in the community are getting involved in something, and they are supportive of that. But they might not be supportive of all, you know, the different backgrounds of people that are involved in the project. So they're not as open. So there's people within our project that people in the community definitely would not talk to on a normal basis, but they see that their kids are involved with them. This is the only reason they, you know, are attaching themselves to the organization. So it's interesting because they're kind of forced to, you know, work with people because they see their kids involved with it, when they wouldn't have done this in the past if their kids weren't involved. So in a way that's beneficial, but it's also kind of forcing people to kind of work together, and I think that's, you know, it's good, but it's also a challenge in the long run.
Yeah, no, and that's really interesting because that reminds me, like, Shamar's comment about the homeland idea. And when you're talking about kids, like, oftentimes it's like either first generation or, you know, kids that were born and raised here. So it's like, whose homeland? You know, like when you have somebody who's a first generation or somebody who's a convert, it's like, is here our homeland? So if you're thinking about, you know, doing work in urban areas or doing this kind of development, where, you know, what is your homeland? And to have the parents kind of come in through the kids, it's interesting to see that happen, you know, this kind of trend for youth leading the way in some ways for this. So that's really interesting. One of the questions too, it's like, you know, in terms of supporting to have more parents and families involved, obviously that's a healthy thing, to have more discussions to make sure that, you know, these relationships are healthy and supportive, and, you know, you, like Mark said, have space to sort of be, you know, and grow. That's healthy too. So that's good to hear though, and there's a lot of positive response too, so that's wonderful. Okay, so this is sort of, you know, we've touched on it already, but I wanted to delve into a little bit more as well. It's sort of, you know, further any like racial or ethnic differences in who gets involved and who kind of stays away, and maybe, you know, the type, you know, obviously if you're encountering microaggressions, you know, when you're doing this work, or kind of, you know, the context surrounding it from the response. Kind of, you know, touch on a little bit, but if there's any other stories or anecdotes or anything that you have that kind of touches on this topic of differences and, you know, racial or ethnic kind of support across those lines, you know, feel free to jump in and sort of talk to that.
You know, I'll hop in just very quickly, just because I sort of left a hanging thought in that last comment, which was about the point around solidarity and not charity. And you know, we don't mean that in any way to like deride the concept of charity, of course.
Right.
But you know, what we want people's orientation to this project to be is locking hands to help rebuild this community. And we want people who are outside of the community, you know, whether, you know, particularly like physically, to see themselves as allies to the folks who are closest to this work and are most impacted by the work, and to see themselves as accomplices in us creating or for fulfilling this vision that we're jointly coming up with. And so, you know, when we do our large sort of volunteer engagement days, I mean, alhamdulillah, thankfully, we've had an opportunity, you know, we've brought a very sort of multicultural groups together. We took a busload of people from the ISNA convention in downtown Detroit last year, brought them over to our area, put them to work for a couple of hours in an urban garden and clearing debris out of some of our houses. You know, we've had success in those ways, but what we're not asking folks to do is to necessarily show up in the spirit that, hey, I'm here to help these needy people. Right. That's not the idea. The idea is, hey, this is, you know, I'm obligated to stand side by side with my brother and sister in their endeavors to do good, and this is a project that is objectively good. And so I want to be allied, and I want to follow their leadership as they're the ones who are most impacted by this work. So that's the sort of like framework that we're trying to bring to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to add on, if I may, I mean, Iman's whole piece has been a vehicle that begins to draw on stories. I mean, that's been the larger kind of narrative around connectivity, right? The fact that, you know, our stories matter and we have stories, right? And how do those stories connect? We oftentimes in organizing hear the phrase, you know, especially from the First Lady and the President himself, the world as it is and the world as it should be, right? And this idea of like how are we working towards that community that we would love to see, right? And our stories matter. So we've really been trying to look at this from many different angles, but more from an organizing framework, because you know, we believe that if you begin to provide a level of context through training and understand why the work in urban centers is necessary, then I think even the legitimacy, right? I mean, our beloved Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you know, he was an organizer. I mean, you know, however you want to slice it, and he understood the self-interest between many different tribes, and being able to connect them and to understand, to get them to understand their stories and why their stories were so important to the larger narrative. And you know, how could you not see your self-interest, right? This collective self-interest, but deepen your self-interest to folks that live in the inner city, right? How could you not want to see justice, compassion, dignity, mercy, all of the things that we talk about amongst in our spaces? How don't you want to see that elevated, a platform created and amplified? And I think what we're talking about here, what the phenomenon is, where you start to really see more kind of larger area Muslim communities versus the urban Muslim community. We're all trying to communicate, you know, with this quote unquote immigrant community to say that, look, understand the larger narrative here. Understand why it's important for you to be, you know, working to transform communities, you know, by using or taking an issue like housing, whether it's affected in Chicago or Detroit, right? Taking an issue like housing, how it interconnects to maybe displacement and what's going on in your own homeland, right? Taking issues, you know, when we start talking about dignity, looking at issues like corner stores that are operated by the very same people that you pray alongside, right? And see why that makes sense and how Islam is represented. So, you know, we can sit on, you know, the news channels, we can blog, we can tweet, we can do all these things about how messed up or bigotry, or we could talk about, you know, what the problem is. But I think all of our organizations are now trying to provide that solution to connecting stories, right? And mainly what I was so interested in this topic was finally, you know, a platform where we can articulate this, but it's a venue for folks and a vehicle for folks to get directly involved. And fortunately, we've seen the younger generation really step up, right? That's really ready to work and to organize side by side. The phenomenon, and I'm sorry for being long-winded, the phenomenon in Chicago is that, you know, IMAN isn't a masjid, and we're not centered around a large masjid. So, you know, our base is you know, diverse socioeconomically, you know, racially, it's diverse, and yet we have a phenomenon where we oftentimes become marginalized by the African American Muslim community, because they don't see their self-interest with the larger Muslim community oftentimes when you start to talk about the very same issue areas. And I think that even derives just from a more, I would say, a more philosophical disagreement that is constantly taking place and being had around our centers around the country. So sometimes it's really about really trying to organize that base of Muslims that are already there to see the larger self-interest as well. So we have a phenomenon where we're not the masjid, but we're trying to anchor around the masjid to build a vehicle that can get people back connected.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely interesting. I think, like, we talk about that too. It's like, why should somebody get involved in anti-racism work, just in general, like the theological work that's necessary to overcome racial prejudice? And, you know, we talk about the fact that people, I mean, they need to do this. It's something that they, for themselves, are going to be asked about on the Day of Judgment. You know, it's like something where it's important for you as a person to do this work. It's not something you can just afford to lay, you know, just put it out of sight, out of mind. And the other thing we talk about is like even, you know, wealth, time, these things are blessings, yes, but they're also tests. And it's what are you doing with this? You know, what are you doing with the blessings that you've received? And how are you giving back? How are you doing these things? So that's really interesting. And I think the fact that it's the stories to get to know one another, like, you know, in the Quran 49:13, that idea of getting to know one another also means embracing our differences. And I know one thing for MuslimARC, it's like we are trying to make people realize we need to embrace differences, not just lump us all in as Muslim America and then leave it. So that's really interesting. It's helpful. It's amazing to see this work being done on the ground the way that you all are doing it. So, you know, we've got like about 10 minutes left. So closing thoughts on the other question that we just had. You know, Sarah. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add something on that. So for us, both at an interpersonal level and at an organizational level, we're trying to get people out of the silos in which society exists, right? Like people are used to living in their bubbles. And so to get someone to understand from a different perspective, I mean, that takes hard work. And that's what, whether, you know, Shamar was talking about, that one-to-one process of storytelling and getting vulnerable and like being real about how does my humanity connect to your humanity. Like that, I think that is just like the heart of the work, really. For us, like I came into this role after some groundwork was already done. I'm South Asian, and I'm going into a Black Muslim community, right? So that in and of itself required some groundwork from people that came before me, like Naeem Shah Jr., Umar Hakim, who's my partner now with the ILM Foundation from South LA. And so like that credential of like, you know, like vouching for me was critical to be able to work in that community. And still, you know, it takes time. And so I think that like what we're talking about is sort of a consistency and a patience with like going across bridges or whatever, like being able to really know someone is not like a one-time off thing, like doing like a service thing. It's like continuous work and continuous like building trust. And so, yeah, and so I would say like that is, it still comes out, right? Like that we all have some kind of implicit bias about someone else, and to like, to know that that exists and to continue to fight it both internally and when it exists at an interpersonal level and when it plays out organizationally, like that is the essence of the work, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so helpful to kind of be able to talk about these things and just get them out there, you know, and sort of reframing. I mean, it's reframing the narrative, it's unpacking the narrative around some of these things. And I'm thinking about kind of just the general narratives that are surrounding race and charity in the United States generally, and I feel like that gets superimposed for Muslims, and you know, it just turns into kind of this thing that needs to be unpacked quite a bit. So we had a question actually from one of the audience members who's watching. So she was asking, it's Layla, I think it's Poulos, asks how to deal with pushback. So I guess pushback from community members, like how do you approach that? How do you deal with it? And then the second part of her question, is there any, you know, effort like to extend services to poor suburban communities, or you know, is that something that's kind of on the horizon, or is there something being done already on the ground?
Just want to share because she said something about poor
Pushback.
suburban, about pushback.
Oh yeah, pushback and then poor suburban like communities.
I guess I'll comment on the second one
Okay.
first, just because it's on my mind.
Mm.
But I think one of the things in the community that we're in right now, there's an inner city, but it's also attached to a suburban kind of like decline also. So you end up, you know, servicing both areas. You service the inner city, but then you also serve the poor suburban because there's kind of overlap in both areas. And I think that's just, you know, I think that's, you know, that's an effort that's important, because you start noticing that a lot of people from the Muslim community will hang out in the inner city and they'll go back home later.
Right.
And you notice that they're, you know, a lot of times the children of, you know, people at the masjid are within the inner city, so that relationship is important to strengthen the core and then also strengthen what's around you.
Right, right. It's a great point.
You know, I'll just comment on the question about pushback. I don't really have anything profound to say, but the way, you know, that we've dealt with it is essentially to trust that there are enough people in the community, broadly speaking, who agree with the sort of value sets that we're trying to propose, and in our own ability to do the hard work that it takes to sort of bring people to the table and start to have some of these conversations that are necessary to bring people to the same sort of understanding as us. And that ultimately those two groups of people outnumber the vocal naysayers. You know, I mean, that's frankly one of the only ways I think that you can proceed. There are always going to be people opposed to some element of your work. You know, their own edeb is going to determine how vocal they are about that, right? But you know, I would just say as a sort of point of inspiration, just keep on going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it depends on. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So I think it depends on where the pushback is coming from.
Okay.
As Brother Mark said, if it's someone that's like getting in the way and you can't do the work without them, then I think it's leaning into what does our faith say and really like inspiring from that way without sounding too preachy, you know. But like what like sort of using the examples, and we have so many. And you know, I'd like support would be like how do we systemize and sort of create a curriculum around organizing in Islam and really develop that, because that would be great if it's something that people could easily reference. But I mean, I think that it depends on if it's not that and it's just like someone who's just making a lot of noise, then just go around them.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just add that you know, at IMAN, we constantly say you know, you can curse the darkness all day, but who's lighting that candle, man? And so yeah, man. I mean, you know, your work speaks for itself. We get, I mean, you know, man, you know, I don't know how it is for most places, but in Chicago, you definitely gonna get criticism and pushback. I mean, it's an organizing city, it's politically gridlocked, so that just comes with the day-to-day. You have to keep pushing. And models and, you know, sustainability in the work speak for itself. And so, you know, we constantly are going back and forth to the drawing board about what is working, what is not, evaluation, goal-driven, oriented. And, you know, if you spend so much time trying to deal with this level of pushback, I mean, then you will become almost like an organization of reporters versus getting things done.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, stopping at there, it's hitting, you know, stoplights and then just kind of waiting. So at some point, yeah, I mean, like Mark said, some people are just not going to be happy with various aspects of it. At that point, you know, where does all the work go?
And the last piece that I would add to that second piece, I mean, you know, yeah, I mean, I think there's enough work to go around. I mean, when you think about the poor suburbs, even in the Chicagoland area, it seems like that the phenomenon always happens south, right? You got the south side, then the south suburbs still have the poor phenomenon. So the same type of structural pieces that's happening in the south suburbs in Chicagoland area, and I'm pretty sure across the country, is still a huge phenomenon. It's on the rise. Trying to tackle that vast of a problem is difficult. You got to create a model first.
Yeah. And absolutely, I think it's really valuable because the other part of it, I know I just read a statistic that was saying that, you know, for the first time in U.S. history, half of all students in public schools were from low-income backgrounds. So obviously this isn't, I mean, this is a very serious problem, and if we're not the ones at the forefront trying to, you know, use our faith, trying to use our skills, our talents, our resources to kind of address these issues, then what are we doing? You know, where are we? So that's a great point. And that's one thing I wanted to mention too before I forget is that the conversation, you know, the hashtag Muslim Urban Justice, we want this to continue. I mean, you guys are doing this work every day on the ground, which is amazing. We want this to continue. We want people to start reframing and rethinking the narratives to some of these issues. So, you know, we can take some time right now to kind of, you know, think about some closing thoughts, some things that people should take away, some main takeaways from this, and kind of, you know, if they're not involved, how to get involved. If they're kind of interested, what should they do? How can they push it? And also talk about, you know, if you're going to be at ISNA or if you're going to be somewhere where people can come, you know, get involved in a more, you know, on the ground way, definitely feel free to tell us about that as well. So we can start, Arbazz, if you want to start and just talk a little bit about where to go from here, some takeaways for the audience.
I definitely think there needs to be more avenues to get people involved in the community. I mean, there's a lot of people within the Muslim community are kind of scared to get out of their comfort zones. and they don't know where to go. Yesterday, I was actually talking to someone from ICUC, which is Pico's affiliate in the Inland Empire, and they were talking about something to do with ethnic studies and getting more diversified education within the public school system. And there's very few Muslims to comment on this and be involved in organizing and being part of the whole project. And they're looking for Muslim voices. There's a lot of organizations looking for Muslim voices, but those voices are not being heard, and a lot of Muslims within the community have not been able to get out of their comfort zone. And a lot of times there's not a lot of training also for people to go out and work in the community. So I think those two things are important. Showing people, especially college students, showing other people that we want to get involved, avenues to get involved, and educating them on the tools of getting involved. So I think that's that's a place to start.
And where should people go if they want to get involved with Sahaba Initiative? Are there any websites or Twitter handles, or will you be at ISNA or other conferences on the ground anytime soon?
They could go to sahabainitiative.org or go to our Instagram or Facebook. It's all /Sahaba Initiative. And then hopefully I should be at ISNA, so I'll be walking around. So if you guys see me, you can just stop me.
Oh, good. I think a lot of people might be, so we should have a little on-the-ground Muslim urban justice, like a little get-together or something. That'd be great. Okay, and Sahaba Initiative doesn't have an H on the end, right? There's no H on the end?
There's no H on the end, so it's just SAHABA initiative.org.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Mark?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier our website is just dreamofdetroit.org. Very simple. I will say that we're still a very small organization in the sense that we actually don't have any staff yet. I have a separate full-time job. My board members are all separately employed and so forth. So this work is entirely volunteer-driven to this point, and we're just now starting to get to the point where it actually doesn't feel sustainable to continue as a volunteer-led operation, and we're starting to chart a path toward having a more staff-driven model. I would say that if you're at all, inspired by our work or appreciative of our work, that we would definitely welcome financial support. So if you visit dreamofdetroit.org/contribute, you can donate there. There's a link if you wanted to become a monthly donor. Any amount helps. Absolutely, any amount helps. I work in the world of grassroots mobilization and online fundraising, so I know the power of a bunch of small contributions coming together to add up to something larger. So that's one way that folks can definitely help us. If you're interested in like a further conversation, particularly if you're in the Detroit area or the Metro Detroit area, you can feel free to email me at MARK at dreamofdetroit.org, and maybe we can set something up where we can speak or even meet up and figure out a way for you to get more involved. And then lastly, I would just ask that people remember us in your dua. We are sort of at a critical moment in our development as an organization. I sincerely believe that we're only this far because of the dua of some very special people, and so I would just please pray for us if that's the least that you can do. I appreciate it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, no, totally understand on that front. So, yeah, it's wonderful to see all these initiatives, though, and I'm really, like, alhamdulillah, we've got some very solid resources when it comes to wealth. So it's just a matter of making sure it gets to the right places. Yeah, Sarah, any key takeaways and where you guys will be if people want to come get more involved?
Yeah, so you can find us on LA Voice Pico, both on Facebook, and our website is lavoicepico.org to find out more information, welcome donations. I would say that for me, the big takeaway here is, as a community, for whoever's watching out there, and where, however, do some real work internally on systemic racism. So really step into it and like read and learn and pay attention to what's happening in Ferguson and Black Lives Matter and everything else that's going on, to just really like be on top of that, because we need more Muslims on the field. We need more Muslim organizers. We need Muslims to just develop a level of sophistication, to bring the spirit of Malcolm X, to bring the spirit of the Prophet ﷺ, and all of our other leaders that have come before us to today. Like, we need that. We're like really starving for that. And so just like, I would say, just be inspired to step into it more and to like work through it more, and yeah, talk to people within your cities about it and your families, friends. Like, what's happening is not okay, and we will be asked about it. And so when inshallah, when we meet the Prophet ﷺ, like, how are we going to answer? How are we going to answer? What did we do for his people?
Yeah, no, that's very important. And I think part of it too is like this idea of what makes a good ally. There's a lot of internal work, and it's not just external. And people need to, it can be hard sometimes, kind of challenging your own, thinking about your own privileges, challenging your own internal, reflective kind of or response, automatic like triggering kind of responses. But yeah, to think about it and kind of work internally, it's a huge task. Do that while you're contributing financially. Like take it upon yourself, contribute financially, and then in the meantime also work internally, and then step up a little bit more. Yeah, Shamar. Oh, I think we might have lost Shamar just at the last second. We'll see if he can. There he is. Okay, good. And then we'll end on him, inshallah, and then continue this conversation. I mean, for us, MuslimARC, we would love to have second part to this conversation and to delve further into the issues and kind of the work that you're doing. Shamar, are you there? Oh, good. Okay, good. Yeah, no, I wanted to end on you and kind of talk about some of the key takeaways that you would kind of point out, and then where you guys will be and where people can go if they want to get more involved.
Okay, yes, you can go to imancentral.org, imancentral.org. That's IMAN. Central.org. You can go there. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at Iman Central. You can join the mailing list, donate, get in. There's a get involved section on our website to get involved. Iman will be at ISNA 2015. We will be doing a walking tour. The same type of tour that Mark Crain mentioned that they did last year. We'll be doing that in Chicago. We will also be doing a half-day organizing training, special training at ISNA as well. So you can go to our website and register for both of those activities at ISNA. And yeah, man, the key takeaway, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues and peers, man, that's on this panel. I think, again, man, we first and foremost ask you to keep us in your dua. It's a struggle. It's a fight to the end, to struggle and fight for resources. And to readjust resources to places where it's necessary for folks that are underserved, underprivileged, and marginalized. White supremacy is continuing to run rampant. It's a state of emergency, as I like to say. It's something that we have to deal with internally. All of us are struggling with it. And I think that please, if you're in the Chicago or Chicagoland area, you can hit me at Shamar. SHAMAR at imancentral.org to get involved. I tell you to get involved because, again, it is not fun to just stand on the sideline. We do not need cheerleaders at this time. We need people in the game. And I appreciate MuslimARC having this discussion, going from online to on the ground working, because we need people in the game. We need people supporting the Sahaba Initiative. We need people supporting Dream of Detroit. I visited Dream of Detroit myself. It is a beautiful, beautiful initiative. I was very inspired, touched, just to see what's taking place in Detroit. And definitely, Mark, I'm going to be an avid supporter, both financially and in dua and on the ground as training, as you know. Sister Sarah, your work is critical in LA. It's important. The type of work and the heavy lifting with the formerly incarcerated population is never an easy one. The DOJ system needs to be reconstructed, and the monstrous task that it takes to reconstruct and to deal with recidivism is just critical in this point. And I think that is the overall. That plays a large part into the platform of what you see urban communities looking like to this day, and to all of the immigrant, quote-unquote, communities across the country. Now is the time to have a Muslim presence and a voice. It is serious business. Now more than ever, people are more open to the Muslim voice, regardless of the rhetoric that you hear from the right or anywhere else. People are willing and they're open, they're ready to see. We got young people in Chicago on the south side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago is looking to see many other populations, just being inspired by the possibilities that's what's out there. And I think a lot of time we just have tunnel vision in the way that we think about Islam and in our approaches and our mechanisms. So please support all of these initiatives and definitely keep us in your dua first and foremost.
It's a beautiful closing, yeah, it's you guys are leaders in this. You guys are inspiring, and I think that's just it's a huge thing for young Muslims. It's a huge thing for older Muslims, and like you mentioned, Shamar, there's different with the vision of Muslims in the United States right now. Like this is where we need to be. This is the kind of work. It speaks for itself.
Yes.
It speaks for itself, and it's inspiring. And at the end of the day, all we got to do is fight the good fight. And nobody say that we're gonna solve all these issues in the next 15 years, the next 50 years even, or even in our lifetimes. But at least we fought the good fight on our way there. So, inshallah, everyone's hard work will be accepted. Everyone's du'as will go a long way. And I just want to say, Jazakallah khair for all, spending this time with us, taking time out of your busy schedules to be here with us and talk to us and, share your wisdom with us. So Jazakallah khair. You can find MuslimARC online. It's muslimarc.org. You can sign up for anti-racism trainings online as well. You can follow us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. And we'll post up links to all of the organizations in case you missed it, so that way you can go and donate and contribute, join the mailing list, and all of that good stuff. So inshallah, keep us in your dua, everyone who watched today, and please share the link with anybody else who you think might be interested. And we hope to talk to you all soon. So Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.